Muli, magandang hapon, magandang araw mga classmate at welcome sa ating classroom. We're still talking about behaviorist perspective and we have already tackled about the theory of Ivan Pavlov, specifically the classical conditioning theory, and of course, Thorndike, Edward L. Thorndike with his connectionism theory. We shall continue the topic through talking and discussing about the theories of John Watson and Burrhus Frederick Skinner. Okay, so John Watson was the first American psychologist to work with Pavlov ideas. Okay. He too was initially involved in animal studies, then later became involved in human research behavior. He considered that humans are born with few reflexes and the emotional reactions of love and rage. All other behavior is learned through stimulus, response, associations through conditioning. So he believed in the power of conditioning. So that he said that if he is given a dozen of healthy infants, he can make them into anything he wants them to be. So behaviorism was the science of observable behavior. So if we talk about Watson, we always go back to his experiment on Albert. Okay. A little Albert experiment. Albert here is the name of the child. Okay. So, how does this experiment of little Albert from John Watson? Okay. So, Watson applied classical conditioning in his experiment concerning Albert, a young child, this one, and a rat, a white rat. Isang bata na si Albert at isang rat or daga. Okay. In the beginning, Albert was not afraid of the rat. Okay. Hindi siya natatakot sa rat. But what did Watson do? He made sudden noise each time Albert touched the rat. So, because of Albert was frightened with loud noise, he soon became conditioned to fear and avoid the rat. So, dahil takot yung bata sa ingay, natakot na rin siya doon sa daga. So, his mind was conditioned that the noise and the rat comes together and natatakot siya. So later, the child's response was generalized to other small animals. Then, ang nangyari, hindi na lang natakot sa rat yung bata, kundi natakot din siya sa iba't iba pang mga animals. So, he was afraid also of other small animals. So, Watson then extinguished or made that child unlearn fear by showing the rat without the loud noise. So, again, Watson made a remedy showing the rat, okay, without the noise in order for the child to overcome the fear, okay, of the rat. So, ang ginawa niya, tinanggal niya yung noise, yung pinanggagalingan ng ingay para manumbalik at makondisyon ulit yung mind ng bata na ang rat ay hindi nakakatakot. So, from the experiment of little Albert from Watson, he came up with the following basic assumptions, no? Okay. So, number 1, all behavior is learned from and shaped by the environment. So, behaviorism stresses how environmental factors influence behavior, virtually ignoring innate or inherited factors. So, according to the assumptions of Watson, it's all in the environment. No? So, basically, he ignored the innate or inherited factors, which is essentially in a learning perspective. So, humans are born with a blank slate mind, or what you call it tabula rasa, and learn new behaviors via classical or operant conditioners coming from the outside factor or the environment. Okay, so all behavior is learned, okay, learned from and shaped by the environment. Another one, behaviorism is principally concerned with behavior that can be observed rather than with internal events, such thinking and emotion. So, through behaviorists largely accept the existence of cognitions and emotions, they prefer to study them only observable in the context of what can be objectively and scientifically measured. So, they are concerned with what is being observed or the context of what can be objectively and scientifically measured, and not on the internal events like the thinking or your emotions, no? So, behaviorism is concerned with the behavior that is being observed or can be observed. Next one, human learning is very similar to the learning which takes place in other animals. So, this implies research can be conducted on animals as well as humans, what is known as comparative psychology. So, you can conduct research on the humans as well as animals, no? To compare. For behaviorists, animal research became the primary source of data simply because such environment could be easily controlled. So, looking back on Ivan Pavlov also, no? 'Di ba? Yung kanyang experiment ay tungkol din sa aso, no? So, animal. And then ito namang si Watson ay daga naman yung kanyang ginamit. So, meron silang meron silang assumptions na gustong patunayan sa pamamagitan ng experiments na to. And then they are using the animals as the primary source of data on what they are looking for, like the information that they want to, what they call this one, or the assumption, no, na they want to prove. Okay. Next, psychology should be regarded as a science. So, any theory must be supported by empirical data obtained by systematic observation and measurable or measurements of behavior. So, theoretical components should be as simple as possible. So, psychology is a science, but the theoretical components should be treated as simple as possible so that it can be easily understood and it can be easily be shared. No? Okay. Behavior is the result of a stimulus response. So, even complex behaviors can be reduced to a simple stimulus response association. So, there are complex, what you call this, complex behaviors, no? Na parang feeling natin ay hindi na mabibigyan ng solusyon. But again, even this complex behavior can be reduced to a simple stimulus response association. So, meaning to say, the behavior is still always the result of the stimulus and response association. So, Watson's research may help us understand the fears, phobias, and prejudices that people develop. So, remember, experts are saying that phobias is an excessive irrational fear to something specific like an object or situation. So, classical conditioning is used both in understanding and treating this phobia, no? Conditioning, classical conditioning of the mind can help us understand and treat this phobia, anxiety, etc., etc., no? These feelings that are excessive caused by irrational fear of something specific, like the elevator. No? Minsan, ayaw natin makulong sa elevator. Na pag nakita mo yung elevator, there is something in you that is being triggered. So, when you develop a phobia, classical condition can often explain it. Phobias are based on irrational fears. So, ang nangyayari ngayon, pag nakakita ka ng elevator, natatakot ka na or hindi ka na makahinga since your brain was conditioned that on that fear of the certain area. Okay, so phobia is one of the things that can be treated through the research of Watson, no? So, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, yung sobrang stress, anxiety, trauma. Okay. A severe anxiety disorder that develops after you experience a traumatic event, like nakasaksi ka ng isang patayan, okay? And then nagkaroon ka na ng sobrang trauma, nakasaksi ka ng isang aksidente. Can cause you to feel danger even when you are safe. Like, nakakita ka ng isang aksidente sa daan noong umuulan. Okay, so, ang nangyari, if you are riding in a public transport and it's raining, feeling mo, hindi ka na safe. Parang, feeling mo may mangyayari na. Okay, dahil sa trauma mo. So, severe anxiety is learned through conditioning. So, the anxiety is being learned kasi nako-condition yung mind natin na umuulan. Halimbawa, umuulan, may mangyayaring disgrasya. Elevator, hindi ako makakahinga. 'Di ba? So, conditioning. So, classical conditioning also is being used to therapies to treat these disorders. So, exposure therapies are often used for anxiety disorders and phobias. The person is exposed to what they fear. So, over time, when they are exposed, okay, to what they fear, like, example, yung fear mo sa elevator nga. If you are exposed to that elevator every day, over time, they're conditioned to no longer fear it. So, kumbaga, yung dati nako-condition yung mind mo na kapag nakakita ka ng elevator, natatakot ka na. Sa ngayon, pag nakakita ka ng elevator, alam mo na wala kang dapat katakutan. So, over time, your mind is reconditioned. Okay? Nababago na yung condition ng mind mo. Okay, so, aversion therapy aims to stop a harmful behavior by replacing a positive response with a negative response. So, this is often used for misuse of substance such as alcohol or cigarettes, di ba? So, sabi natin, ang hirap-hirap daw bitawan ang pag-inom or paninigarilyo kasi tawag natin it's either mahihilo ka or tawag natin manghihina ka. Okay? But that is an negative response. So, aversion therapy here aims to replace a positive response, okay, replacing a positive response with a negative response. So, imbes na, kumbaga parang paniniwalaan mo na hindi mo kaya na tanggalin yung substance yun sa katawan mo, maniniwala ka ngayon na masama yun, no? Masama yun sa katawan mo, kaya bibitawan mo na siya. So, kapag ang nangyari sa'yo, halimbawa, yung paninigarilyo, ay normal na medyo yung tang mo, di ba? Yung parang, you salivate all the time. Ang gagawin natin, sabi nila, ang turo ng mga doktor, gawin mo na lang, kumain ka ng candy or whatever, lagi may nilalaro yung bunganga natin para hindi niya maalala, hindi na ma-miss, parang gano'n. Hindi niya mabalikan yung lasa nung sigarilyo na hinahanap-hanap natin. Okay, so, classical conditioning in therapies, we have two, the exposure therapy and the aversion therapy. That is according to Watson. Okay, moving on, let's talk about Burrhus, Frederick, Skinner. Okay, so, in the first part of our lesson, in behaviorism, nabanggit na natin si Skinner, no, na sinasabi natin na siya ang founder, no, or proponent ng operant conditioning, while Pablo is the proponent of classical conditioning. So, Skinner, like Pablo, Watson, and Thorndike, Skinner believed in the stimulus-response pattern of conditioned behavior. So, pare-parehas naman itong tatlong to, or apat na to pala na behaviorists. They believe, all of them believed in the stimulus-response pattern of the human behavior, no? His theory zeroed in only on changes on observable behavior, excluding any childhood of any processes taking place in the mind. No? So, Skinner wrote Science and Human Behavior in 1953, in which he pointed out how the principles of operant conditioning functions in social institutions such as government, law, religion, economics, and education. So, Skinner's work differs from that of the three behaviorists before him in that he studied operant behavior, or what you call the voluntary behaviors used in operating on the environment. Thus, his theory became to be known as the operant conditioning. So, operant conditioning is based upon the notion that learning is a result of change in overt behavior. Changes in behavior are the result of an individual's response to events or stimuli that occur in the environment. So, let us look into this one. So, ito. Specific consequences are associated with a voluntary behavior. So, in this one, rewards, the use of rewards and punishment, no? So, in here, rewards introduced to increase a behavior. Okay. Samantalang punishment is introduced to decrease behavior. So, Skinner's work differs from that of the three behaviorists, sabi nga natin kanina, since siya ang pinagmulan nung the law of rewards and punishment. So, a response produces a consequence such as defining a word, hitting a ball, or solving a math problem. When a particular stimulus response pattern is reinforced or rewarded, the individual is continued to respond. So, kung ang isang individual ay nibibigyan ng reward continuously, okay? Continuously yung kanyang positive response. Now, if we use punishment, we use punishment in order to decrease a behavior naman. Nagdi-decrease yung kanyang negative behavior since alam niya na kapag ginawa niya ulit yon, meron siyang punishment. But remember that we have terminologies being used in operant conditioning like the reinforcement. It is the key element in Skinner's stimulus response theory. A reinforcer is anything that strengthens the desired response. So, there is a positive reinforcer and a negative reinforcer. So, pag sinabi nating positive reinforcer, is any stimulus that is given or added to increase the response. Ilalagay mo ito or bibigay mo ito para madagdagan yung response. An example of positive reinforcement is when a teacher promises extra time in the play area to children who behave well during the lesson. So, sasabihin niya, kapag nag-behave kayo, magkakaroon tayo ng extension sa paglalaro ninyo. Another is a mother who promised a new cell phone for her son who gets good grades. So, positive reinforcer yon, no? Still, other examples include verbal praises, star stamps, okay, and stickers. Especially if these are children, no? Sa mga nasa kinder, no? Nilalagyan ni teacher ng mga stars sa kanilang kamay as a proof, no, that they did well. And through this simple rewards or the teacher become the positive reinforcer, and the stamp itself is a positive reinforcer also that produces more response from the children, no? And then negative reinforcer naman, negative from the word negative, is any stimulus that results in the increased frequency of the response when it is withdrawn or removed. So, a negative reinforcer is not a punishment actually, no? Hindi siya punishment. In fact, it is a reward. Paano? For instance, a teacher announces that a student who gets an average grade of 1.5 for the 2 grading periods will no longer take the final examination. The negative reinforcer is removing the final exam. Negative yon, yung reinforcer na yon. Which we realize is a form of reward for working hard and getting the average of 1.5. Diba? Parang sa unang tingin ay parang negative reinforcer siya kasi tinanggal mo yung isang exam. But looking into this is a reward for the child who's been working hard to get the grade of 1.5 from the 2 examination periods. Diba? So, magkaiba yung negative reinforcer sa punishment, no? So, a negative reinforcer different from a punishment because a punishment is a consequence intended to result in reduced responses. An example would be a student who always comes late is not allowed to join a group work that has already begun. So, punishment yon. Kasi, hindi mo siya pinayagang sumali na sa activity ng classroom mo, di ba? And therefore, loses points for that activity. So, nakita nyo yung pagkakaiba. Kanina, hindi siya pinayagang mag-exam doon sa last exam, but that is the reward for getting a grade of 1.5. So, hindi yon parusa. Samantalang, nagiging parusa ito kapag, halimbawa na late estudyante, hindi mo na siya pinapasok, or, pinasali sa activity, so he loses the points in the activity. So, the punishment was done to reduce the response of repeatedly coming to class late. So, meron kang sinosolve na isang problema para hindi na siya, nabigyan mo naman ng solution, hindi niya uuliting malate ulit. But still, it's a punishment since there is a loss of points doon sa side nung estudyante. So, Skinner also looked into extinction and non-reinforcement. So here, responses that are not reinforced are not likely to be repeated. For example, ignoring the student's misbehavior may extinguish that behavior. Huwag mong pansinin, okay? Yung hindi nila pinapansin, halimbawa, may mga estudyante talagang minsan, gusto lang magpapansin, kumbaga parang kulang sa pansin. Huwag mong pansinin. Later on, sila mismo titigil na. Okay, so extinction or non-reinforcement. Okay, so here are the following implications of operant conditioning according to Skinner. Number 1, practice should take the form of questions or stimulus, answer or response frame which exposes the students to the subject in gradual steps. So, practice, okay, should be gradual, no? Hindi siya biglaan. Hindi siya, to call this one, apurahan. So, it should take the form of question-answer frame that exposes the students to the gradual steps in learning. Okay. Another one, require that the learner makes a response for every frame and receives immediate feedback. Ito yung sinasabi natin doon sa law of what do you call this one? Law of effect. Ano yung isa? Law of readiness. And then, law of, what is the other one? Law of exercise. Sabi natin na, practice makes perfect. However, that practice will not be completed, no? If it does not receive a feedback. So, again, Skinner is saying us that require that the learner makes a response for every frame, require them to do it, but again, give them immediate feedback on what they have achieved in order to sustain their interest and motivation in learning. Okay? Try to arrange the difficulty of the question so the response is always correct and hence a positive reinforcement. So, like if you are making a quiz or a long-term exam, we see to it that the first part is quite easier than the last part. No? Most of the time, the first part is multiple choice and the first questions, at least 1 to 10, are easier to answer. No? And the last part will always be essay or analyzation questions like identification or true or false. No? But the arrangement of the question should be from the, what do you call this one, the questions that are easier to answer to the difficult ones. No? That is still positive reinforcement. Ensure that good performance in the lesson is paired with secondary reinforcers such as verbal praise, prizes, and good grades. So, let us ensure the students that if they perform well, no, we should give verbal praises. Hindi tayo mawawalan ng ganda kapag natuto tayong bigyan sila ng, what do you call this one, paghanga. No? Let us praise them for what they did. Give them prize or give them good grades. No? Let us not be biased, okay, and unfair in treating these students. Okay. And these are also the principles derived from Skinner's operant conditioning. So, 1, behavior that is positively reinforced will reoccur. Intermittent reinforcement is partially effective. So, positively reinforced behavior will reoccur. No? Pag binibigyan natin ng positive reinforcement ang behavior ng bata or achievement ng bata, tuloy-tuloy ito or nagre-reoccur, hindi ito mawawala. Patuloy niya itong gagawin. Kasi alam niyang maganda ito kasi nga meron siyang positive reinforcement, no? Information should be presented in small amounts so that responses can be reinforced. And last one, reinforcements will generalize across similar stimuli, producing secondary conditioning. So, looking back at the beginning, try to look into the rewards and punishment that your former teacher used in your class. So, try to think of something, even if you were in elementary or high school, something that your teacher gave you as a reward or a punishment. And try to connect it to Skinner's operant conditioning. So, anong masasabi nyo doon sa way or the paraan ng pagbibigay niya ng reward and punishment? Okay, so, again, as I've always been telling you, rewards and punishment should be positive, no? It should be positive in the sense that it will increase the motivation of the students in learning in your class. Hindi ito dapat magiging paraan ng pagiging bias mo. Like, sabi natin, reward can still be negative, no? And at the same time, a punishment can become positive also. It depends on the teacher's strategy and motivation in doing all of this. So, be sure that when you give reward and punishment, it is always in the positive side. It does something good in the teaching and learning of your students and you or in your classroom. Okay, so avoid punishments that turned out to be a negative reinforcement to your students. Okay, so what is important is that we are shaping the behavior of our students. Be careful in doing it. So again, thank you so much for dropping by in our classroom. Sa ating classroom, lahat tayo ay matututo kahit tayo ay magkakalayo. Hanggang sa muli, maraming salamat po.